who doesn't want to be for fair trade? Am I going to step up and order a cup of unfair trade coffee? So basically with fair trade, the farmers pay twice what market value is for the coffee bean. Now the higher price paid to the farmer plus the cost of monitoring this sort of fair trade policing, etc. Fair trade coffee as a result is much more expensive. For some people it's worth it to pay 50 cents more to feel good about buying fair trade coffee. But what you have to understand is the actual backdrop of this, the mechanics of what happens here. The coffee bean, for example, is a fussy plant. It needs a specific place, a specific climate to grow properly. Most of the time it's in the third world that you find this. The third world countries are ripe with corruption, shady property rights, if any, a complete breakdown in rule of law. These things all play into the price of coffee, right? People who are fair trade advocates will say, shouldn't the fact that Starbucks, after they're charging $4.50 or something for a cup of coffee, shouldn't the farmer, the poor farmer who's making the bean, shouldn't he make $3? But again, this is economic ignorance. The economic value of a coffee bean from like Peru to Portland is very different. There was long roasting, there was careful temperature control, there was the FDA packaging of this stuff. All along the while, this product has gained value, market share value, that it didn't have in Peru. Now, the fact that product gains economic value as it moves along the chain does not mean there's some massive injustice or all this unfair trade is taking place. That's not what it means. In fact, and ironically enough, I'm not a big fan of Starbucks, but third world coffee bean farmers are making as much as they are because there's a huge demand for premium coffee in the United States and in the Western world at large, largely because of companies like Starbucks. Now, the fact that the Starbucks executives are making more than the coffee farmer is a real troubling thing to the average liberal, and he's going to start screaming about how there's all this economic injustice in the world, there's just all this evil corporations, and that they're just the bane of our existence as a human race. No, not really, because yes, there's an economic gap in prosperity between the two, but there would be a much, much larger gap without Starbucks. Do you see that much at least? And of course, here's some of the underbelly, some of the stuff that most people don't think about. Paying artificially high prices for coffee to coffee farmers in South America, for example, encourages these coffee farmers to stay in a business that maybe isn't best suited for their long-term interest. I mean, market share for coffee has dropped significantly recently, and fair traders will be like, we need fair trade laws more now than ever, but there's a reason that market shares have dropped. A lot more people in the world enjoy premium coffee, so a lot more companies are getting into the business. For example, Vietnam's a huge exporter of coffee now, and it's not injustice that drove down the price. It's actually the economic laws of supply and demand. So the point is that if the South American farmer was competitive in the 90s, the game's changed, and fair trade has sort of, policed the whole thing and created this ruse, this false sense of security for that guy, when maybe he should be taking his land and his future and his prospects moving on to greener pastures, maybe growing something else, looking towards the future, being entrepreneurial. But instead, mingling with the markets and stuff, long term could bite them. And that's something that nobody ever talks about or thinks about. Good-hearted people, but people who are delusional or completely ignorant to economic realities, in order to maintain these fair market schemes, they have to actually have a vast amount of prosperous people who are willing to spend 50 cents more a cup just to feel good about fair trade. Well, with the economic realities that we face, that might not be the future. So this is all a house of cards. It's all setting up false expectations for these farmers. In other words, this is just one example. What seems like you're helping the poor is not actually helping the poor. Really what it's doing is making people who want to feel good. But it's not actually helping the poor. It's not allowing individuals to be in control of their future and face the fiscal realities that the world offers. Because eventually, pompous New York City wine and cheese eating liberals, if the price of fair trade coffee gets too hot, they'll just jump ship and fly a different flag of liberalism to make themselves feel good. That's the reality. Leaving the fair trade farmer high and dry. These are the things that people need to be educated on. Conservatism just faces this reality. It doesn't hate the poor. In fact, one might even be able to argue that the person who actually tells the truth, who actually lives in the world as it is rather than as they want it to be or want it to feel like it is actually the person who really cares about the poor.